rich cowboy bought the bride no one wanted, then froze when he saw her face. Jace Harper stood on the edge of the hovering platform, his boots scraping against the metal grates. The frontier settlement stretched below him in a chaotic tangle of neon lights, floating walkways, and dusty alleyways. Off-world traders shouted over the roar of hovering vehicles, and the scent of scorched metal mixed with desert dust. Jace, one of the richest ranchers on this colony, had seen many strange things, but today's auction was different. Something in the air made him uneasy, though he could not say why. The auction was a regular event in the colony. People bid on livestock, supplies, even rare machines. Today, however, there was something unusual on the block. A young woman. She stood on a raised platform, her hands at her sides, her expression calm. The crowd barely noticed her. Whispers spread that no one wanted her. She was said to be too quiet, too pale, with eyes that seemed almost too bright under the market lights. Some called her strange, even unsettling, but Jace did not look away. He studied her carefully. There was a stillness about her, a dignity that made her stand apart from the restless crowd. Even as people laughed or turned to other items, Jace felt an unexplainable pull. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, and for a reason he could not yet name, he felt that he had to claim her. The bidding began. Other wealthy ranchers raised their hands, offering numbers in quick succession, but soon they lost interest. Murmurs spread through the crowd. "No one wants her," someone said. "She's not worth the trouble." Jace raised his hand, his voice firm, placing a bid higher than anyone had offered. The auctioneer banged the gavel and the crowd hushed. "She's yours," the auctioneer said. The young woman's eyes met Jace's, and for a moment he froze. There was something familiar about her gaze, something that stirred memories he could not reach. It was a feeling both thrilling and frightening, and he realized that his curiosity was only beginning. He stepped forward and helped her down from the platform. The murmurs followed him as he led her to his hovercraft. He did not speak much, but he felt the weight of the moment. The woman, who had not even whispered a word, walked beside him with quiet confidence. Her pale skin contrasted with the neon glow of the city below, and her eyes, those strange bright eyes, seemed to see things others could not. The ride to the ranch was long. The hovercraft hummed as it lifted into the air, gliding above the jagged mesas of the frontier. Jace looked at her again, wondering about her story. She said nothing, but her presence filled the cabin with a calm energy. He did not understand it, but he trusted it. The ranch itself was unlike anything from Earth. Vast hover cattle pens floated over the canyon floor, tethered by energy beams. Machines hummed and whirred, tending to livestock that shimmered faintly in the strange light. Jace's wealth had built this place, but even here, among all his machines and riches, he felt that today was the start of something new. He led the young woman to a small dwelling near the edge of the cliff. It was simple but comfortable, with a wide view of the swirling nebulous skies. "This'll be your room," he said. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was not fear or sadness. There was hope there, too. Days passed. The young woman, whom Jace now knew as Lyra, adapted quickly to life on the ranch. She moved gracefully among the hovering cattle, touching the control panels with ease. Jace watched her from a distance, impressed by her intelligence and skill. She did not speak much, but she communicated through gestures and expressions. Slowly he began to understand her. She was not merely a quiet bride, she was someone capable and extraordinary. Jace found himself thinking about her constantly. He remembered the first moment he saw her on the auction platform and the feeling that had frozen him. It was still there, stronger now. There was something about Lyra, something beyond her skills or beauty. He could not explain it, but he knew that she had a past and a future that was important, not just for her, but for the ranch and perhaps even the entire settlement. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the canyon, Jace and Lyra stood on the edge of the hoverpen platform. The livestock below were restless, their faint bioluminescence reflecting off the metal walkways. Jace spoke quietly. "Lyra, do you understand what this place is?" "What we do here," she nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. She raised her hand, pointing toward the canyon. Jace followed her gaze and saw a faint shimmer in the rocks, a glow that seemed alive. "What is that?" he asked. She did not answer in words, only touched the shimmer with her hand. The energy pulsed under her touch, spreading outward like ripples in water. Jace felt a shiver run down his spine. There was power here, something he had never felt before, and Lyra was at the center of it. The next day, a small group of traders arrived, bringing strange devices from a distant planet. They had heard of Jace's wealth and the unusual energy readings from the ranch. They looked around, skeptical, but Lyra moved among them with ease. She adjusted the machines, aligning them with precise movements that seemed almost instinctive. Jace realized then that she was not just a bride, she was a bridge between worlds, someone connected to forces beyond the frontier. Despite her silence, Lyra began to teach Jace things he had never known. She showed him how to read the energy fields, how to sense the life in the hover cattle, and how to listen to the whispering winds of the canyon. Each lesson deepened his respect for her, and slowly, admiration grew into something more. He realized that she had not just entered his life by chance. Her arrival was a turning point, a new chapter he had not expected but could not ignore. One evening, as the nebula cloud swirled overhead, Jace sat beside Lyra on the cliff edge. The wind carried the faint hum of the ranch machinery below. "Lyra," he said softly, "you've changed everything here. I don't know why, but I feel like I've been waiting for you." She turned to him, her bright eyes meeting his. For the first time she spoke a single word in a language he did not understand. Yet he felt the meaning clear in his heart. It was a greeting, a connection, an acknowledgement. Jace knew then that he could not think of her as simply a purchased bride. She was someone extraordinary, someone who had chosen to be here, and someone whose presence would alter the course of his life. He could not predict what lay ahead, but he understood one thing clearly. The frontier was no longer just a place of work and survival. With Lyra at his side, it had become something alive, full of mystery, promise, and power. As the twin moons set and the first light of dawn touched the hover platforms, Jace made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever dangers, discoveries, or changes, the woman he had bought, the bride no one wanted, would no longer be alone. And he would face whatever the frontier had in store, with her by his side. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hover platforms of Jace Harper's ranch. The twin moons had disappeared behind the nebula clouds, leaving a soft purple glow in the sky. Jace walked beside Lyra, the quiet bride no one had wanted, toward the edge of the canyon. Today he would begin teaching her more about the ranch's operations, but he suspected she had lessons to teach him as well. Lyra moved with ease among the hovering cattle pens, her hands brushing lightly over the control panels. She adjusted the energy beams, guiding the cattle that shimmered faintly with bioluminescence. Jace watched, impressed by her understanding. He had grown accustomed to running the ranch himself, but Lyra approached it differently. She seemed to sense the life within the animals, the energy of the land itself, and the machines responded to her touch as if alive. "You have a gift," Jace said quietly, his voice low so the cattle would not be startled. "Most people can't control this machinery without hours of training." Lyra glanced at him, her bright eyes flickering with a hint of a smile. She raised her hand and pointed toward one of the hovering pens. The machines began to hum and align themselves perfectly, guiding the cattle into neat formations. Jace's heart raced. He had expected obedience, skill, maybe even courage, but what he saw now was something different. Lyra was connected to the ranch in a way he could not explain. She did not just manage it. She felt it, understood it, and shaped it effortlessly. Later, as the sun rose higher, strange ripples began to appear over the canyon floor. The energy of the nebula above seemed to reach down, touching the land in waves of shimmering light. Jace frowned. This had never happened before. Machines wavered, cattle stampeded, and alarms blared softly in warning. Lyra reacted immediately. Without hesitation, she stepped toward the edge of the platform, her hand outstretched. The shimmering waves seemed to respond to her touch. The air rippled and stabilized, and the machinery began to hum normally again. Jace could not move. He stared at her, realizing that she was not an ordinary woman. She had power, energy flowing through her, connected to the nebula itself. "What are you?" Jace asked, unable to hide the awe in his voice. Lyra turned to him, tilting her head. She did not answer in words. Instead, she moved her hand across the air, and a soft glow appeared between them. Symbols formed in the light, shapes and patterns he could not recognize. And yet, somehow, he understood. She was showing him a message, a warning, a promise. Jace's mind raced. He had purchased a bride, a quiet, overlooked woman, expecting someone to live quietly on the ranch. Instead, he had found a being capable of controlling energy itself, connected to forces he could barely imagine. The thought made him both nervous and excited. Days passed, and Jace began to learn more about Lyra. She was patient and observant, teaching him to sense the subtle energy flows in the ranch and the animals. He discovered that her touch could calm frightened cattle instantly, and her presence made the machines work more efficiently. Even the floating platform seemed to respond to her, stabilizing with a precision that no technician could achieve. Yet, despite all this, Lyra remained quiet. She never spoke much of herself. When he asked about her past, she shook her head and touched the air lightly, showing only faint images, memories of distant planets, strange lights, and vast landscapes that Jace could not name. He realized that she was not just from another place, she was from another world. One evening, while the stars began to twinkle against the darkening nebulous sky, Jace and Lyra explored a nearby canyon. She led him to a small cavern hidden behind a jagged rock formation. Inside, the walls glowed faintly, reflecting patterns of energy similar to those she had shown him before. In the center of the cavern sat a crystalline structure, smooth and mirrored, humming softly as if alive. Lyra approached it cautiously, her hand hovering above the surface. The crystal pulsed, reacting to her presence. Jay stepped closer. As he gazed into the crystal, a wave of memories swept through his mind. Images of his childhood appeared, him as a young boy staring up at the nebulous sky, waiting for something he could not name. And there, in every vision, was a figure with the same bright, pale face as Lyra. Expected, gasping. This is impossible, he whispered. Lyra looked at him, her expression calm, almost gentle. She placed her hand over his, guiding him closer to the crystal. Images continued to flash, distant planets, ships moving through the stars, and the young woman from his visions, always standing beside him. Jace realized that the moment he had first seen Lyra on the auction platform was not chance. She had been part of his life long before he remembered, waiting across time and space. The feeling of recognition that had frozen him at the auction now made sense. She was tied to his past, and, somehow, to his future. As he absorbed the visions, Lyra spoke softly, though not in words he understood. Her voice was melodic, each syllable carrying a weight he felt rather than heard. The meaning was clear. She was here for him, and together they had a purpose he could not yet comprehend. Returning to the ranch, Jace felt a new sense of responsibility. Lyra was not just a bride. She was a guardian, a protector, and a guide. The frontier they lived in was dangerous, not only because of the harsh environment and rival ranchers, but also because of the hidden forces Lyra was connected to. The following days brought more disturbances. Machines faltered, cattle became restless, and small energy pulses shimmered through the hover platforms. Lyra moved among it all with calm precision, her hands tracing the air as if painting patterns no one else could see. Jace observed and began to understand her methods, though he could never replicate them. One afternoon, a group of traders arrived with strange devices from a distant colony. They had heard of unusual energy readings from Jace's ranch and were eager to investigate. Some were skeptical, others curious. Lyra approached them without fear. She touched the devices lightly, and the machines hummed in harmony. The traders exchanged astonished glances. It was clear that she had knowledge they had never seen before. Jace felt a mixture of pride and wonder. This quiet woman, once overlooked by everyone, had become the heart of the ranch. She commanded respect without words, and her presence brought a sense of order and possibility he had never known. That evening, Jace and Lyra stood together on the cliff edge, looking down at the glowing pens and hovering cattle. The nebulous sky shimmered above them, a swirl of colors that reflected the energy Lyra could control. Jace spoke softly, almost to himself. "I thought I knew what this place was, what life was here. But I was wrong. You've changed everything." Lyra turned to him, her bright eyes meeting his. She spoke a single word, melodic and soft, in her own language. Jace did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was a greeting, a connection, and a promise. She was here, not as someone purchased or controlled, but as an equal, a companion in something far more important. Jace felt a new resolve. The frontier had always been about survival, about money, about power. Now it was about partnership, trust, and the unknown. He could not predict what would come next, the disturbances, the hidden energy, the distant rivals, but he knew one thing clearly. He would face it all with Lyra. And as the twin moons rose again, casting their silver light over the canyon, Jace Harper understood that the bride no one wanted was no longer simply a part of his life. She had become the reason his life had changed, the key to the mystery surrounding the ranch, and the person he could no longer imagine being without. The frontier was no longer just a land to tame. It was alive, dangerous, and beautiful. And together, Jace and Lyra would face it, ready for whatever the stars had in store. The sun had barely risen over the jagged horizon when Jace Harper spotted the faint glimmer of dust on the far canyon edge. Hovering vehicles, moving in strange formations, hinted at intruders. Jace's heart tightened. Rival ranchers had heard whispers of Lyra's abilities and the energy disturbances at his ranch. They would see the strange bride as a threat, or worse, an opportunity to seize control. Lyra stood beside him, calm as ever, her pale eyes scanning the horizon. She had learned quickly how to sense energy flows, the same ripples that had stabilized the ranch before. Her presence alone gave Jace courage, but he knew that skill alone might not be enough. The intruders were not ordinary. They were determined, armed, and greedy. Jace mounted his hoverbike, a sleek machine tethered lightly to the ranch's energy field. Lyra followed, stepping gracefully beside him, her movements almost floating. "We need to protect the pens," Jace said, though he wasn't sure if she needed his words. She simply nodded, eyes focused. As they reached the hovering cattle platforms, the first shots rang out. Plasma bolts ricocheted against the energy beams, sending sparks into the air. The intruders were closing in. Jace fired back, aiming carefully, while Lyra extended her hands. A soft blue light shimmered around her fingers, expanding outward. The energy pulsed through the platforms, creating a protective shield over the livestock. Jace could barely comprehend what he was seeing. Lyra did not fight like a normal person. She guided the energy with precision, forming barriers, redirecting the plasma bolts, and calming the startled cattle. Each motion was deliberate, yet fluid, as if she were conducting an invisible orchestra. The rival ranchers hesitated, surprised by the display. They had expected an ordinary settlement, perhaps a simple defense, but they were met with a force beyond their understanding. Yet determination kept them moving. Jace realized that they would not give up easily. The ranch and Lyra had become something worth risking everything for. After a tense hour, the intruders regrouped, retreating slightly behind rocky outcroppings. Jace took a breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Lyra, we need to know what we're dealing with," he said. She did not answer in words. Instead, she touched his arm, and a vision appeared in his mind. Images of her people flashed before him. A distant alien world, floating cities, vast plains of energy, and guardians who protected it. Jace staggered. She was not human. Lyra's heritage was tied to a race exiled long ago, and their power was not just for show. It was essential. The intruders might see her as a prize, but to her people, she was a protector of secrets that could shape worlds. "Now I understand," Jace whispered. "This isn't just about the ranch. It's about something bigger." Lyra nodded, then raised her hands. The energy around her grew brighter, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. The intruders advanced again, firing in bursts. Lyra's shield extended, forming a dome over the ranch. The plasma bolts bounced harmlessly off the energy barrier. Jace could see the awe in the eyes of the attackers. They had never seen anything like this. Yet he knew awe would not stop them forever. "Lyra, we need a plan," he shouted over the hum of energy. She pointed toward the cavern in the canyon, the place where the crystal had shown him visions. She wanted to lead the intruders there. Jace hesitated. Taking them near the crystal could be dangerous, but he trusted her instincts. They moved quickly, the hoverbike gliding over the terrain. The intruders pursued, cautious but persistent. Lyra's energy guided the path, creating invisible barriers that slowed them, forcing them to take longer routes and exposing them to Jace's careful shots. She seemed to know exactly what to do, and Jace realized he was no longer the protector. She was. Finally, they reached the cavern. Lyra entered first, her hand brushing the walls. The crystal pulsed, recognizing her presence. She whispered something in her alien language. The intruders hesitated, sensing the change in the air. The crystal's light reflected onto the walls, projecting images of alien guardians, giant figures glowing and imposing, as if the cavern itself had come alive. The intruders panicked. Some fled, others froze in terror. Jace took advantage of the distraction, disabling the remaining weapons with precise shots. In moments, the threat had passed. The ranch was safe, at least for now. Jace turned to Lyra, awe and relief flooding him. You saved everything." She looked at him, calm as ever, yet her eyes held a depth he could not measure. She had not only protected the ranch, but revealed a part of herself he was only beginning to understand. "Your people," Jace began, choosing his words carefully. "They sent you here for a reason, didn't they?" Lyra nodded. She spoke softly, a few words he could barely grasp, yet their meaning was clear. She was a guardian, sent to protect the energy sources of the frontier, sources that could change the balance of power across the colonies. Jace felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He had thought he had bought a quiet bride, someone to share his life and home. Instead, he had discovered a protector, a guide, and a being connected to the universe in ways he could not yet comprehend. And now, he realized, their fates were intertwined. He was part of her mission, whether he liked it or not. That night the ranch was quiet, the hovering platform settling into their gentle hum. Lyra moved among the cattle, calming them, her hands glowing faintly with the energy that now seemed natural to her. Jace watched from a distance, feeling both pride and humility. He had thought he was in control, but the truth was different. Lyra was not someone to control. She was someone to follow, someone to understand, and someone whose presence changed everything. He approached her cautiously. "Lyra, I don't know what comes next, but I want you to know I'm with you. Whatever happens, we face it together." She turned to him, her alien eyes reflecting the nebula light. She placed her hand on his chest, and a warmth spread through him. He felt her meaning clearly. He was accepted not as a master or protector, but as a partner, someone trusted and needed. As the night deepened, the stars above the canyon shimmered in patterns that seemed to mirror Lyra's energy. Jace felt a connection to them he had never known. The frontier was no longer just a place to work or survive. It was alive, vibrant, and full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And Lyra, his bride no one wanted, was at the center of it all. The following days brought more changes. Lyra began to teach Jace how to sense the subtle energy fields around the ranch, to understand the life within the animals, and to predict shifts in the nebula that hovered above. He learned quickly, guided by her calm patience and intuitive methods. The two of them worked together seamlessly, a bond forming that went beyond words. Yet even as they grew closer, Jace could feel the tension of the outside world. Rival ranchers would not forget the defeat, and the secrets Lyra protected were too valuable to remain hidden forever. He knew the next challenge would be greater, perhaps far more dangerous than anything they had faced. One evening, as the twin moons rose again, Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff, gazing into the swirling nebula sky. Jace joined her silently. "You've changed my life," he said softly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable but calm. He took her hand, feeling the energy hum lightly under his fingers. "Whatever comes next," he added, "we face it together." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting both the nebula above and the promise of unknown worlds beyond. Jace realized that life on the frontier had become something more than he had ever imagined. It was no longer just survival or wealth. It was discovery, partnership, and the unfolding of something far greater than either of them could face alone. And as the night wind swept across the hovering platforms and the glowing cattle pens, Jace Harper understood one undeniable truth. The bride no one wanted had changed everything. Not just the ranch, not just his life, but the very future of the frontier itself. The morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of metal and dust across Jace Harper's frontier ranch. Hovering platforms creaked under the weight of the livestock, and the nebula above shimmered faintly, warning of energy shifts. Jace rode along the edge of the pens, scanning the distant horizon. He did not have to wait long. Dust clouds rose from the canyon trail, and the silhouettes of rival ranchers appeared, armed and determined. Her pale eyes glowed faintly in the soft sunlight, and the air around her hummed with energy. Jace had learned to trust her instincts completely. She had guided him through the past weeks, teaching him to sense the subtle energy flows, to read the animals, and to anticipate disturbances. Today, however, would test them both in ways they could not predict. The intruders advanced quickly, moving with coordination and precision. They expected a simple battle, relying on firepower and numbers. What they faced instead was something beyond their understanding. Lyra raised her hands, and a soft blue light radiated outward. The energy pulsed across the hover platforms, creating a protective shield that deflected the first shots. Plasma bolts ricocheted harmlessly into the canyon walls. Jace fired carefully from his hoverbike, aiming to disable vehicles rather than harm the attackers. He trusted Lyra's energy to keep the cattle and ranch safe, but he also knew the intruders would not give up easily. Their leader, a burly man with a scar across his face, shouted orders, trying to flank the ranch. Jace's mind raced, calculating every move. Lyra, as always, seemed 2 steps ahead. With a graceful motion, Lyra extended her hands toward the canyon. The energy pulsed, and a wave of light shot forward, forming barriers that funneled the intruders into narrow paths. Machines stumbled over the uneven terrain, and some of the attackers hesitated, unsure of the invisible force reshaping their path. Jace realized that Lyra was not only protecting them, she was controlling the battlefield itself. The rival ranchers regrouped and advanced again, more cautious this time. They tried to target Lyra directly, but each time they approached, the energy field shifted, deflecting their shots and keeping them at a distance. Jace watched in awe. Lyra had become something extraordinary, a living guardian who could manipulate the very forces of the frontier. Finally, the leader of the intruders shouted a command, signaling a direct attack. They had brought heavier weapons, hoping to overpower the energy fields. Jace's hoverbike wove through the chaos, disabling vehicles where he could, but it was Lyra who changed the outcome. She focused on the energy around her, and the nebula above seemed to respond. A pulsing wave of light descended, spreading across the canyon and washing over the intruders. The attackers froze, disoriented by the powerful energy. The crystal she had shown Jace in the canyon began to resonate with her power, amplifying her abilities. Images of alien guardians appeared in the air, ethereal figures immense and glowing, standing as protectors of the land. The intruders faltered, overwhelmed by a force they could not comprehend. Jace dismounted, moving toward the lead intruder. With careful aim, he disabled the remaining weapons. The rival ranchers finally began to retreat, humiliated and defeated. Lyra lowered her hands, and the energy field slowly dissipated, leaving the ranch safe once more. The cattle grazed calmly, unaware of the danger that had passed, while the nebulous sky shimmered peacefully above. Jace turned to Lyra, his chest still pounding. You saved everything. Not just the ranch, but us. I don't even know how to thank you. She looked at him with her quiet, steady gaze. Her expression was calm, almost serene, yet filled with a depth he could not fully understand. She had not acted out of obligation. She had acted out of purpose. You have shown me more than I ever imagined, Jace said, his voice soft. I thought I had bought a bride, someone to share my home. But you've taught me what it means to protect, to connect, and to understand the land and life itself. Lyra placed her hand on his arm, a simple gesture that conveyed agreement and trust. The days that followed were different. Jace and Lyra worked side by side, repairing damaged platforms and reinforcing the energy fields. She taught him more about the hidden forces of the frontier, the energy flows in the nebula, the life within the cattle, and the connection between the land and the hovering platforms. Jace learned quickly, guided by her calm patience. Together, they turned the ranch into a fortress of energy and harmony, unlike any settlement in the colony. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Lyra led Jace to the cliff edge overlooking the canyon. The stars reflected in the shimmering nebula sky, and the ranch glowed softly below. Jace felt a sense of peace he had never known. Lyra, he said quietly, I know we face dangers, and there may be more ahead. But I want you to know I'm not just here because I bought you. I'm here because I want to be. With you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Lyra looked at him, her pale eyes reflecting the twin moons. She spoke softly in her alien language, a gentle melody that resonated in his mind. He did not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. She trusted him, accepted him, and offered partnership, not obedience. Jace smiled, realizing that the frontier was no longer about wealth or control. It was about connection, understanding, and courage. Lyra had not only changed his life, she had changed the ranch, the frontier, and the possibilities that lay beyond the nebulous skies. As they stood together, a subtle shimmer of energy rose from the canyon below. The crystal in the cavern pulsed faintly, a reminder of the hidden forces they now protected. Jace knew the frontier would never be the same. With Lyra at his side, they could face any challenge, uncover any secret, and safeguard the ranch and its mysterious energy for the future. Over the next few weeks, the ranch thrived. Hover cattle moved with grace, energy fields pulsed steadily, and Lyra's quiet guidance kept everything in harmony. The intruders did not return, perhaps deterred by the power they had witnessed. Jace worked alongside her, learning, protecting, and beginning to understand the deeper bond forming between them. One morning, a faint ripple appeared across the nebulous sky. Lyra sensed it immediately, her hands glowing softly as she traced the energy. Jace watched, amazed at her instinctive understanding. She pointed toward the distant stars, and he realized that their journey was far from over. The frontier was vast, full of mysteries, and now they would explore it together. As the sun set behind the jagged mesas, painting the sky with streaks of purple and gold, Jace took Lyra's hand. No matter what comes next, he said, we face it together. You've changed my life, and I will never let you face it alone. Lyra smiled faintly, a simple yet profound expression that spoke of trust, hope, and a shared future. Jace felt the energy hum beneath their feet, connecting them to the land, the cattle, and the nebula above. They were partners, guardians, and explorers of a frontier that was alive, dangerous, and beautiful. For the first time, Jace Harper understood that the bride no one wanted had become the center of his world. She had brought mystery, power, and purpose into his life. The frontier was no longer just a place to work or survive. It was a living, breathing adventure, and together they would face whatever came, ready for the unknown, bound by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged in the nebula-lit canyons of their extraordinary ranch. And as night fell, the twin moons casting silver light across the hovering platforms and glowing cattle pens, Jace knew one undeniable truth. Lyra was no longer just a bride. She was his partner, his guide, and the key to the future of the frontier. The past, the auction, the doubts, all of it had led to this moment. And together, they would meet the challenges of the stars, the nebula, and the unknown, side by side.